This is the Straight Up Breakdown Podcast with Greg Smith and Jay Foreman. Tell it to me straight up.
Hello, and welcome in to the Straight Up Breakdown Podcast, proudly part of the Hail Varsity Network. I am Greg Smith, your new year, still the same me, friend.
I am Jay Foreman, your proud Buffalo Bill alumni, AFC East champion. Finally, we have dethroned the Patriots. Sorry, Sasha.
I always forget Sasha is a Patriots fan. Like I always forget.
But she's
that.
a good one. She's not the.
Yeah, but that's probably why I actually forget all the time. She's actually not awful about it. And I say that as somebody who is an awful Lakers fan, so I understand kind of where that comes from. So scale of 1 to 10, how happy were you about the Bills?
Oh, a 12. A 12. And, really, to be honest with you, when we drafted Josh Allen, I was kind of so-so because his completion percentage in college was like 55%. And historically, you don't become a better passer when you go to the best, playing against the best, Sunday in and Sunday out. But he's done it. And I will say this, the organization from, ownership to GM to obviously I think McDermott's a great coach and he fits Buffalo. Rex Ryan was kind of he served his purpose where he kind of brought a little pizzazz there. But I think they all kind of and they got a really good offensive coordinator, really good scheme. They've traded well, and what they've really done, what people don't understand is they kept really really good pieces at every single level, but then they've also had to let some really good players on defense go. They've hit on their running backs, with Singletary. Then they went and got Diggs. And then they got like Jonathan Brown, who was kind of like I wouldn't say he's a cheap free agent, but he was a bargain, And
you got when you make this kind of jump, you have to have those kind of guys, right? And
then they have panned out. And then Stephon Diggs has been huge. They got 2 tight ends, kind of, you got Knox that is good. And then you got, I think, the big guy Miller, who's kind of like another offensive lineman. I mean, they got him listed at 250. You see him, man. He's 275. The TV is not doing him any.
That guy is not 250.
Right. They're not doing. And then they got young guys on defense that are really, really good. So, but then also it takes, they made the playoffs last year and filled their diapers up, in that game against my Texas. So it's two of my teams.
Both your teams, yeah.
And then the deal with expectations is huge. Now, granted, yes, the Patriots are depleted. It kind of finally, after 20 years of having the best cap management, the best culture, obviously with the best quarterback of all time, the best coach of all time, and it finally kind of imploded this year. Maybe it's COVID or whatever, but it was just one of those things. And I do think it would be different if the Patriots had Tom Brady because that system up there is made for him. He makes the defense better. So it was time. And then as the season went on, there was more pressure for them to not only make the playoffs, but win the AFC East. And, there's nothing better than the last game of the season and putting up 56 points on the Dolphins. I mean, look, no fans or not. It's cold up there in Buffalo.
Right.
That's a foregone conclusion that the Bills were going to win.
Right. So now each week we go through Coach Speak, right, where we give you something that somebody said and we kind of tell you what they really meant.
Coach Speak to Real Talk.
Now this week, I feel like we already know what this guy means. I just want to talk about it. Right. Steph Curry last night had one of those games that I feel like when you found out that Klay Thompson had, hurt his knee again, was that the day of the draft? Maybe I think that was the morning of the draft. It was horrible timing for them. That there's any good timing for those types of injuries. But you knew coming up through the season you were going to have some nights where Steph Curry just goes off. Last night was one of those nights. He hit for 62 points, 4 assists, 5 rebounds, 18 of 19 from the free throw line, 8 for 16 from three-point. Yeah. He had a great game. Now, it's funny, and it comes up even more because these last few days, because of what's been happening with the Warriors team, and they haven't been that great. I think they're 3-3 right now. There have been a lot of chatter about Steph Curry and how he's not the same and, he's not that guy.
Yeah.
And so what Steph said after this game was basically he said, insert that Jordan meme of the one from the Last Dance documentary where he said, I took that personally.
Right.
Steph took it personally. But my question really is, I know what he meant, but my question and what I really want to talk about is why it is, though, that people are so quick to kind of cast Steph Curry off to the side or not give him as much credit as maybe you would think given his accomplishments?
Well, I think there's two things. One, it's his personality. He's not overly outlandish. You know what I'm saying? He's not – I mean, he does interviews, but he's more corporate. I mean, when you watched him – if you watched him even in that golf match, he really didn't say much, right? There's not a lot of pizzazz with Steph Curry, except for when he's on the court.
When he's on the court, he talks a lot. Yeah.
He does. He doesn't talk, but he does the shimmy. He does he shoots it and then looks at the bench and runs. I mean, he does some stuff that's more marketable and more with more swag. But it's just the way he looks. Look, Steph Curry. I mean, I've met him before. He's I'm 6'2", he's 6'3". So he's like an almost everyday person walking around, right? So he's not like Kevin Durant or anything like that.
Like LeBron when you see him,
That also, I think it hurts him. And plus, up to this point, he's always been thought of as a one-trick pony, and the Warriors weren't very good last year. They didn't even make the bubble, and then they didn't start out good. And who can you blame? Who's the guy that you're going to blame?
It has to be
Steph Curry, right? He's kind of like the last of the guys left there because Draymond had been hurt, and then they had young Wiseman. He's just a rookie, and then Wiggins. He is what he is. He is what he is. I don't even know why they even gave him a contract. I'm sure they're trying to get rid of him. But then here's also what hurt him. They won one championship with their main three: Draymond, Clay, Steph, right? And then they had Iguodala. They had Livingston. I mean, they had
a really good team overall.
Right. They had Iguodala might be a Hall of Famer. Livingston, if he didn't get hurt, probably would have. And he's always been productive. And then they had a whole bunch of other guys. So they had the best team in the league. Then they go out and get Kevin Durant and win 2 championships and then lose the third, right? So that really it's like you had 3 I wouldn't even say Clay, but you just had 2 mega stars, and they both picked at each other, right? Kevin Durant was thought of as a lesser superstar because you went to the team that beat you when you were up 3-1.
And he had a bad game.
And he had a bad game.
Was it 7?
Game 7.
So Derek would kill me when I remember 7 or 6 where he was just awful in that game. Yeah.
But then you go to the Warriors to win a championship, and you got to get with the team that just had won 73 games or whatever, right? So then that's against Kevin Durant. Then it takes away from Steph Curry because they just lost to LeBron up 3-1, and the only way that you can beat LeBron is go out and get the next thing closest to LeBron, right? And so then you do it, then it all breaks up, right? And it was kind of a weird how Kevin Durant left, right? He went and signed with Brooklyn and then sent a text to Steph Curry. No, Steph Curry came back from overseas.
Yeah, he came back from vacation to try to get him to
vacation and met there in Brooklyn. Probably already signed a contract, but just gave him like the
or at least gave him the verbal that he was coming,
right? So so then they start picking at each other, and then now when you are, it's so different for what people. This is what people don't understand about LeBron. This is not about LeBron. It's about Steph Curry. But when you are that guy, everybody's trying to find reasons to cast you off. Just a year ago, before this championship, they were saying LeBron was the 3rd or 4th best player in the league.
Right,
player. It was KD, Giannis, Kawhi, then LeBron. Then it was always like, okay, we'll give him
whoever. And then somebody else, the flavor of the month is coming. Like maybe James Harden has made this run. Like he only went to LA to make movies.
LeBron just was there. He's trying to get in politics. Only wants to make movies and all this other stuff. Right? He's got he's making Space Jam or whatever it is too, and he's not focused.
Right.
Now LeBron is unquestioned best player in the league. Now you're looking at Steph Curry, whereas even. Well, Clay's hurt, right? So they were Batman and Robin. Those two together are dangerous. Draymond's been hurt, and he's kind of like their mouthpiece, right? He's like the protector of all.
And you have to have that guy. Teams like that generally do have that kind of enforcer, that guy that does the dirty work. Right. And that piece is very valuable within that team. It wouldn't be the same if he left, but in that team
he is so important because he protects them from a physicality standpoint. He brings that edge from Michigan State and where he's from. But then also the way he plays, because that's what makes Draymond really, really good. But then he also does stuff during the game that takes away from any negative game or any way that you can look at Steph because you're so focused on Draymond Green. Getting technicals, always arguing every single call, right? He's taken away from that stuff because when on SportsCenter, you're going to see that's what they're going to show Draymond Green and all that stuff. So it's taken away. Now you only got Steph Curry and you got Andrew Wiggins, who don't even deserve to be out there. He's almost on Kyle Kuzma alert.
Oh, see.
And then you got Wiseman. So he's the only guy. Now he's having to do something that he's – actually, Steph Curry's never had to do this before.
Right.
Because him and Clay were kind of like a package deal. So
they all came up together, right? The rise of one of them happened at the same time as the other.
And they weren't that good yet. So now the Warriors are just 2 or 3 years removed from being in the spotlight.
Man, and it happened like that. Like, it happened so fast.
And you're expecting it. Remember, in all season said we're not done yet, right? Mm-hmm. But then, you can't – Clay got hurt. So now this is the first time in Steph Curry's career that he is the guy that's taking all the obviously positive, but it's going to be more negative. And also, now if they were instead of 3-3, if they were 4-2, 5-1, it'd be a totally different narrative.
Yeah, because then it would be, he might be able to do this. But I actually think that's where the LeBron James comparison really kind of takes hold and makes a lot of sense for this. Right. I'm glad you brought it up, because a lot of things that you also hear about Steph might have pretty good numbers just on the surface, and he had a great game last night, but he might have pretty good numbers, but his team is losing. But if you go and look at some of those early teams, especially in Cleveland that LeBron was on and he was dragging to the finals, you're like, wait a second, maybe he's not that guy. And it's always been, and sometimes this happens, and it's not necessarily completely fair, but in sports you have guys that are just kind of linked with each other.
Right.
And for better or worse, for Steph Curry, in this case is worse, he's linked with LeBron in a lot of ways, just because there was a time period a couple of years ago where Steph was so good every night that people were saying, or a lot of, especially basketball writers like the analytics, were saying, hey, this guy's just as good as LeBron. Maybe Steph Curry's the best guy. Yeah. Meanwhile, LeBron's like, no, he had to put together a super team to be able to beat me, right? And you can kind of understand where that comes from. But I also think that there's also something to it. Never seems like the players in the NBA fully embraced Steph Curry and respected him as being that guy. And remember, was it the year that he won unanimous MVP, and then they had that players vote for MVP, and he didn't win it?
Right.
Like, it's like there's something there with the players. And I wonder, kind of when you were saying about him shimmying on the court and that sort of thing, I wonder if that's part of it.
It's part of it.
But at the same time, there's other guys that showboat too, but they just don't like that guy.
No, because at the end of the day, they're looking at him, and I think his game is more than just doing one thing, but that's all really what he was doing. Is just
bombing threes on people. Now if you get inside of it, like the way that he influences a defense is very impactful. It helps a lot when you got a guy that can basically do the same thing, and Klay Thompson too, right? So then you have Draymond when Draymond was Draymond and he was healthy and out there. Like, that's why it all worked together so well. But I do think that guys look at him as a little bit of a one-trick pony, even if that one trick is as good as anybody as we've ever seen as a shooter.
The best shooter
I still think that people, a lot of people look at him that way.
Yeah, and then also that was back when he was getting exposed on defense, and you got to think Kyrie Irving even in the finals before when Kyrie got hurt, Kyrie Irving was doing work on him. Right. And then when they come back the next year, he put a cement at Kyrie Irving put work. So then the narrative also was out there: you only can shoot threes and you're not playing D. Right. And you also heard it in the comparison between Steph Curry and Clay was Clay's just as good a shooter because he's not the volume shooter, right? So if Steph Curry shoots 20 shots, here's what I mean. He shoots 20 shots. Clay generally would get 12 to 14. But Clay is also D'ing up on the best guy.
Right. He's having to take that mantle up because Steph is not able to do it.
And so those are a lot of the things that are going against them. And then also, let's be honest, if you don't have people, like, I guess, quote unquote, hating on you, then you're not doing something right. So Steph Curry, as he was coming up, was the golden child. They talked about him at Davidson and Del Curry.
Yeah, they got a great story.
Right, as it came up, and then he hit his peak of notoriety and positive notoriety. Right, then they lose, and then you bring in Kevin Durant, and then you go on a.
All of a sudden, they were a villain.
Right?
Yeah.
And then, boom. All right, you're the only dude out there. It was like kind of like the perfect storm for a negative outcome for Steph Curry. Clay gets hurt. Draymond's banged up. He's not hurt. Or Clay gets injured. Draymond's hurt. You bring in you bring in a rookie that's raw. You got to think, James Wiseman, I think you're saying that he didn't start playing basketball until like 9th grade or something.
Yeah, and he didn't. It was last year he didn't
play
at all.
He only played 8 games, right?
Very little experience,
So then he has very little experience, but he's very, very raw, and he's going to be
I think he's going to be pretty good, though. I think
really good.
I think he's a good player.
But then you think remember, they had D'Angelo Russell.
Yeah.
Okay, he's into the Timberwolves now, and then you brought in Wiggins. And those two haven't worked out. So he's out there actually playing. And then a whole cast of rookies.
Yeah, because all of a sudden they went from, when we were talking about those championship years, of all the depth that they had, and it just felt like they were just bringing guy after guy off the bench. Yeah, all those guys. Yeah. And then all of a sudden that's all gone, right? All gone. And they were not able to kind of retool around those shooters and around Clay and Steph
because salary cap.
And then it becomes now, and see, that was the other thing that also, when you really think about how the Warriors dynasty even happened, part of it all goes back to Steph. It goes back to him being injured early in his career. Remember, he was still on, I think it was a 4-year, $44 million contract or something like that when they won that first one.
Yeah.
Right? Because he didn't get the Supermax or whatever until deep into that run.
Right.
So their salary cap was a lot better to be able to have all those guys.
And he had been hurt because, remember, he had bad ankles. And all the running that he does in order to get open, they were like, man, his career might not go past 5 or 6 years. Now I think he's remedied that. Through his all-season training and stuff like that. But so I think that it's just one of those things. And look, the Warriors start winning, they make the playoffs, and if they start getting some big victories, then you start, oh man, that's the great leadership of Steph Curry.
Yeah, then that'll be the thing. Now it's a great opportunity for him, though. Like it really is.
And he knows. I mean, he's been there. I mean, he's growing up in the business. And at the end, and it's the funny thing now is the same writers, both locally and nationally, that wrote all their articles about him and Clay coming up, him and Dell coming up, and how he, is obviously made himself into a Hall of Famer. Are the same ones writing articles like he can't play anymore, and the only thing he can do is shoot threes. And then, I'm pretty sure he's seen some of the rankings. He starts seeing some stuff about, other players, him slipping out of the top 10.
Right.
Well, then he had to let you know he still got it.
That's what he did.
That's what he did.
That's what he did last night. And there's going to be more games like this because he is one of those players, though, when it gets going,
you can't
there's just nothing that you can do. I think James Wiseman actually said after the game, too, that he was like, man, it was weird being out there and being a part of all of this because this is what I used to do with Steph on 2K. Like, I would go out there and put up 60 on people where I just couldn't miss threes, and to actually see it in real life for Wiseman was pretty cool. So it'll be fun to track. There'll be a fun storyline regardless.
I hope they make a good playoff run.
It's gonna be tough.
The West is just tough.
It's just so hard.
I mean, you got to think they beat Portland, and Portland's got probably one of the, if not the best, two guards backcourts in the league. You got to get through them,
right?
And here's the funny thing: in the beginning of the NBA season, this is just coming off the bubble. And you got to think teams like the Warriors didn't have a true offseason where they get like 12 practices or something. Right. The NBA kind of threw them like an extra, like a little.
Yeah, they got to do a little something, which I didn't even realize. I looked up one day and it was like, oh, the Warriors are practicing.
And they were just, getting together to see who would put on some bad Corona weight, COVID weight. So as the season goes on, you're going to see it start to shape out. And, as Draymond comes back and they start to form their team, I think they'll be able to make a little noise. I think that if they had Clay and they can find a way to move Wiggins and then bring in somebody to be like that third option or fourth when Draymond's around, they would be a dangerous team because I think Wiseman causes problems underneath the hoop.
Yeah, he's so athletic. And I think that they are, a key to their future going forward. They're going to have to find a way to move Wiggins because he's getting paid way too much to be that unproductive.
Right.
To where you are always going to be salary cap strapped with that team because you have him, but who's not producing. But you also have Steph on a max, but you also have Clay on a max, and Draymond is up there. He's not on a full max, but he's going to want one when he comes up.
He want to go to the Lakers. I mean,
no, you keep him away.
Him and LeBron, they boys now.
No, it's good. Is he clutch? Is Draymond clutch?
Oh, he clutch.
No, I don't need that. He's not washed, man. I don't.
They need to call up Michael Jordan at the Hornets or down there to Orlando and get Wiggins up out of there.
Just send him somewhere.
Well, that's where you want. It used to be like the Vancouver Grizzlies. You could send them to. Because
Memphis. It's always those teams like Memphis before, even though they're on to come up a little bit now with Ja Morant, even though he got hurt. But like teams like Orlando that like in the East kind of make the playoffs, but are not really
always
all that
7
good.
to 8, yeah.
But they always got cap space because they don't have good players. Right.
Yeah. Nobody wants to play there.
Trade destinations,
and all their good players go somewhere else and play.
Right. So it'll be we'll see what kind of happens there. But something else I wanted to get to. That happened over the weekend.
Let's break that down.
So you know this. My mother-in-law was in town the last couple of weeks, and we watched a lot of football. She watches a lot of football from down there in SEC country. She's from Mississippi, and Mississippi State is her team, right? And so we watched this Mississippi State Tulsa game, which I was joking with her afterwards that nobody was going to remember who won that game because of the fight afterwards, and I actually just had to look it up to remember who won. It was Mississippi State.
Right.
They did win the game 28-26 in a pretty good game between them and Tulsa. But nobody's going to remember the actual game. You remember the fight, and by now you've seen all of the footage afterwards. And was it number 4 for Mississippi State that kicked old boy on the sideline and then made a run for it? I'm not sure where to start. Then after the game, those guys jumped on Instagram Live and were like joking about it. Like the Mississippi State players were in the locker room after the game, like kind of having a good time, hooting and hollering about it. And I'm trying to figure out why in a game that you're playing against Tulsa, who you're probably never going to play again, how we get to the point where you have this all-out brawl and melee after the game, to which now that's all anybody is talking about with that game.
Well, I mean, I think if there's ever a snapshot picture into Mike Leach into the SEC this year, that's it. How he started the beginning of the year, lighting up LSU, kind of bursting on the scene with a quarterback that didn't get any offseason. And they threw for like 500 yards against Bo Pelini's defense and, X, Y, and Z. He was taking the SEC by storm.
Yeah, that was that whole thing all week. That was
what it was. 2
weeks.
And they went out and laid an egg, and then reality set in. Then they go to a bowl game. But also, here's what you didn't mention. Prior to the game, Mississippi State comes out there with their shirts off and meeting at Tulsa at, the middle of the field, and they get into it there. Now, here's one thing. Look, you can come out there with your shirt off, but the brothers I seen coming out there with their shirt off, they need to keep them on, okay?
It was the linemen. It was people with the numbers in the 70s.
Yeah, it wasn't the best look. And, one thing I will say about Tulsa, that coach, when you hear a coach talk about family and protecting your, brother and all that other stuff, they weren't going to back down, right? And those are Oklahoma kids, so they tough. And, whether they were talking junk, through social media or what I really think is Mississippi State thought they were going to come out there and intimidate Tulsa. It didn't happen. The game was chippy from the first play to the end. It was a tight game. Mississippi ended up pulling it. It adds to it. And then, you get into it after the game. One thing said to another. And here's the funny part. The guy that didn't even play, because he was just had his jersey on, is the first one that threw a punch.
Yeah, it was a couple guys. It was one that threw the punch that didn't play. It was another guy that didn't play that was hitting people with a towel.
Hit the people with the towel.
It was all sorts of stuff going on. That's going to be one of those things, though, when they kind of go back, because Mike Leach said after the game that, he hadn't seen the play, but it was football, like that sort of thing, right? I got to believe that once he actually saw the footage of that, and I haven't seen a statement from him yet as recording
he probably ain't going to make a statement.
I think he should just try to avoid it if I'm him. But we're going to have a couple conversations with some guys on that team about some of the stuff that happened.
You just went from full ice fishing mode as far as you have thick ice. Now you're on thin ice. And here's the worst look for Mike Leach. He's up in the stands taking selfies with the few fans that are there at the bowl game. And how do you not see in your – because they showed the view where you could see the fight and see him taking pictures with the fans. How in your peripheral vision not see the melee going on the field?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's the weirdest thing ever that, you would think that he would try to run on the field, get guys to stop, or, he probably doesn't want to end up like Jeff Van Gundy when he got dragged by Patrick Ewing and when they had the fight when the Knicks and all them. But it wasn't a good look for the bowl game. It wasn't a good look for Mississippi State. It wasn't a good look for Mike Leach because at the end of the day, anytime you can win a bowl game during the COVID and the pandemic, it's a great thing for your football team.
Right.
And you want to go in the offseason with the victory or with positive momentum. But all you saw and all you will see
it's the only thing I've seen on that. And it's funny, even talking to my mother-in-law after it happened, she was like, she looking on Facebook to see her friends talking, and all they were doing was talking about the fight. Then it made it, for them specifically, made it worse that Ole Miss then went out and won their bowl game. So when your rival goes out and wins, it's just interesting. Like the whole thing with Mike Leach, and you said like it kind of summed up all the stuff with them. Like that is such a, to me, weird marriage between the coach and the school that I still don't think that that's going to go well.
No,
but because it's also hard. It's a hard situation to win in. I think people really took for granted what Dan Mullen did down there. Now he obviously cashed out and took an even better job in Florida, and he gets his due within coaching circles. But I don't think that people generally understand how hard it was to do what Dan Mullen did, winning 8-9 games consistently at Mississippi State. Like that's a tough place to win. Like
it is. It's more than the little brother to Ole Miss, because Ole Miss is the little brother to everybody else in the SEC.
Right.
So you're like the stepbrother or whatever, or the one that nobody wants to talk about. And so.
And you're not as cool because you're not as cool as Ole Miss. You don't have that same tradition.
And you don't have the alumni. You don't have the cool uniforms. I mean, the uniforms are like a dark
maroon and kind of,
and you can't never really tell what it is. And you don't have any type of like, throwback or alternate uniforms.
Then the players in your state, like there are good players in Mississippi, but the best ones always go to LSU or Alabama.
Alabama, or Ole Miss.
Tough. Or they go to Ole Miss, right?
So it's a hard place to win. It's a hard place to coach. It's a hard place to win consistently. And then you bring in somebody like Mike Leach,
who's just culturally the exact opposite of what you need, of what they had, and what what those folks just identify with. Like it's just totally different.
Right. And maybe sometimes as an AD, you have to take a shot in the dark, and you probably figure like he would score enough points and be exciting. And maybe they're thinking like, hey, look, if we're not going to win SEC titles or be in contention, but what we want to do is be marketable and I guess cool and have a kind of a quirky coach, that's great.
Yeah.
But you can't have a quirky coach with undisciplined players and then you embarrass your university and football team on national TV when that was the only game on at that point in time. And so there's not only going to be conversations between the coaches and the players, there's got to be conversations between administration and Mike Leach. Like you have got to do more than just this. And if he was just there and he tried to get in it and try to stop it, that's one thing. You're up in the stands. You're kind of like Dwayne Haskins when he was taking selfies and the game wasn't even over. You're up there taking selfies with fans, and this isn't just like a pushing match.
No, it was not. There was a full-on brawl in multiple spots. People throwing punches. One guy had a
concussion.
Yeah,
from Tulsa. So it was not a good look, and plus now that the worst part is that the different guys that were highlighted on the highlights, they know your name. It was. I mean, within 10 minutes, everybody had seen all of those clips. You look on social media, that's all people were talking about. Everybody saw the video. People can slow it down and look and pick. Like it's different than like if that fight happens 15 years ago, maybe it takes a while, or it takes the SEC and Mississippi State to review the tape to figure out, and you could maybe internally discipline some guy. That was now I was about to say 2020, 2021. That's not going to happen. Yeah, people are judging, and it's not a good look. And it'd be interesting to see when or if something comes out. The only thing that saved them is the SEC championship was just played. Or not the SEC championship was just played. The first college football playoff game was played with Alabama in there, and then also now you got the national championship game coming up, and plus there was other bowl games going on. So in Mississippi State to Mike Leach's defense, I guess, is off the beaten path.
Yeah, so it's only going to be so.
Only going to be so.
Yeah,
much.
It's only going to rise to such a level.
Right. It's only because people are more worried about who's going to take the Vanderbilt job. Is Pruitt going to stay at Tennessee? Right. Something happens there. That stuff gets swept up.
Sark leaving
Alabama 10 minutes after getting his hat on the stage, which you probably knew before he even.
Yeah, they had to have been talking to him for a while. Yeah. And it's actually kind of where I want to pivot a little bit too. Is the college football playoff happened while we were gone as well. And I guess first, before we actually get into the games a little bit, like a lot of people were talking about they weren't really into this year's college football playoffs because it feels like we keep seeing the same teams.
Right, yeah.
Like Alabama, Clemson for sure have been in, I think, almost every year. I think this is the sixth time that Bama has been in the college football playoff championship, and it's only been going for like maybe one more year than that. Clemson is always in it. Ohio State seems to always be in it. Notre Dame pops up as they do to get blown out. Yeah. So did you have the same level of interest in this that you normally would?
No, because you knew what was going to happen in the Notre Dame game.
That's the one I didn't watch. I didn't watch it. It just kind of I saw it once. I saw I watched a quarter or a half. I was like, I'm just waiting for the game, and I was more interested in the Clemson Ohio State game. So was I. I watched all
because they've played some close games. One time Clemson beat them pretty bad. I think that Ohio State thought that they should have won last year. And Justin Fields had to right a lot of wrong. There's a lot more drama around this game. Dabo taking shots at the Big Ten and Ohio State here recently, but then from the very beginning, let's be honest, people wanted to see Dabo and Clemson eat crow.
And we are in a we were talking about the Warriors earlier about how teams rise up and they're like the fun story,
right?
And then it happens at the drop of a dime or hat that team then becomes the villain. That's happened with Clemson.
Yeah, it did, and it's not any of the players doing.
Nope, it's not. It's really not.
It's the head coach's doing.
Right.
It's the head coach's doing, and he's probably, and I said he's good for 3 to 4 times a year saying some stuff that is totally out of line and supposedly and really out of character for, I guess, a man of the Lord or whatever he says he is. And so it's one of the things. He brought some drama to it. Usually
when he says something, though, his players are able to then back him up on the field, right? Because they've done a lot of winning over the last run here that they've been on, and that they were not able to this time, in part because, and this is why I didn't ever understand Dabo taking those shots at Ohio State, because even if you believe that, you don't, in the Big Ten, even if you don't believe it, you don't say it because you're about to play them. And I don't know if it was you or somebody else that I texted during that game, it was almost like Ohio State came to that and said, hey, man, we got 5 stars too.
Right.
We're
here to play.
Like, we have a bunch of dudes too. We have a really good coach as well. We can play with you. And so it's almost
we just did last year.
Right. So it's almost like because Dabo had this earlier in the season. Remember when he talked about Florida State?
Yeah.
And how basically they almost said they avoided that game because of COVID. They use it as an excuse, but they didn't really have COVID problems. Like, you can do that even if they play Florida State again next year, they're going to beat Florida State, right? It's not going to matter. They don't matter how mad the Seminoles get. They don't have enough people to beat Clemson, right? Yeah. Even after Trevor Lawrence leaves. But Ohio State, they got some dudes. And it's funny because I don't even think that Ohio State is as good totally as they were last year.
No,
I think they're better last year.
They're way better last year.
But the difference really is, and we saw it in this game, Justin Fields played lights out. I feel like also that it was another one of those games where sometimes you have those quarterback matchups where one quarterback feels disrespected because the other guy's the one getting all of the press clippings, and everybody talks about how Trevor Lawrence is going to be that number one guy.
Yeah.
And Justin Fields, remember to talk to, also, maybe he's going to slip behind
Wilson
from
or BYU.
Yeah, and okay, sure, guy. And so he went out there and put it on.
He had a lot to prove. He had a lot to prove that could he perform in a big game against a huge opponent on a huge stage, considering how the game ended last year against Clemson with an interception, with the miscommunication between him and Olave. They were more than communicating. They were in sync, and they were taking Clemson on the
They basically did what they did to people all year.
Oh, yeah, freeway Olave. And then you have Wilson. Then they got 2 freshmen in there. Then the tight ends were getting off. What Dabo's problem is that, you can think it. You can even say it internally in your meetings and stuff like that. You never say it out loud because it comes off 2 ways. One, you come off as arrogant and as a chump, and being a national championship coach, you should know better, right? You've already won.
You've been through this stuff. Like, why would you even need to do that, right?
And then secondly, are you just saying that because you're scared to play him and you're trying to talk your way into a victory?
Right, because he would have much more likely have played Texas A&M.
He would like to play Texas. And
yeah.
when you kind of start adding up the things, were you trying to get Texas A&M in there so you can have an easy victory and then get your shot against Alabama? Mm-hmm. Or were you scared to play Ohio State because you knew that they had some stuff that you were weak at, and what you saw throughout the year periodically that you weren't as good as in the back end on defense, and your linebackers were suspect on the second level as far as covering? Did that worry you? And did you also know that you don't have that number one and number two receiver like you've always had, and because T. Higgins is obviously with the Cincinnati Bengals, and so you knew that you had some holes in your team, and that's fine because you can't be the best, year in and year out. So I think he was more or less trying to talk himself into an easier opponent, and it came back to bite him. I think Dabo over the years, and as you get more success, you're going to have to get more confidence, and there's always that thin line between being confident and arrogant. I think he's teeter-tottering towards arrogant and ignorant, because I always say when you're arrogant, you're confident and you're ignorant at the same time versus being confident and being some sort of realistic type of person. So, it'll be interesting to see how Clemson moves forward from this as far as is it a little bit of a reality check? Because you're losing the best quarterback in the nation and the best running back in the nation.
Yeah, who I was surprised came back for this year.
Right? Why?
I was like, I have no idea why he came back.
And maybe to win a national championship and play one more year, and who knows? But at the end of the day, now he has to really retool. Now they do have a quarterback that's legit.
Okay, yeah, that dude is for real. Yeah, he's for real. And and it's funny because Ohio State and Clemson are actually in similar situations where when they lose guys and guys end up being first, second, third round picks in the NFL draft, that they got the guys coming behind them.
Right, within a year or two.
You could see them within a year or so. But that's kind of that little bit of gap though with Clemson actually is what got them, because you mentioned the wide receivers and how they lost a couple of those guys, and then those guys that they have right now out there, they're good, and you can tell that they're going to be good. They're going to be really good, right? But they're not quite there yet, especially when you go against some of those guys at Ohio State.
And they could be there next year. 17 from Clemson looks like he's going to be the dude. Mm-hmm. But, look, Ohio State had too much firepower. And Ohio State has their, pimples on their skin too as far as, their defense. I think they're, Wade, came into the season as a surefire first-round pick. He has played himself probably in a second, third round pick. He keeps playing bad. He
didn't have a good game.
He's going to have to run a phenomenal 40, to get back up the drafts. But look, they get to play Alabama for the national championship.
Get they swing.
The biggest thing that I'm going to be looking for is how Ohio State plays in this game. Can they get up and play another? Maybe not to the level that they played obviously against Clemson, but can they play offensively to a standard that they should be able to play with their talent? It's one way to do it, to focus on, we get Clemson, revenge tour, payback, we're disrespected, go out there and right the wrong. But now can we take what we did to prepare against Clemson and also look at some of our negatives? Because this is what happens. You gloss over and think you can do the same thing.
Yeah, when you have a big win like that,
can you get back to reality, get back to work, and then double down on it and go out there and perform well against a team in Alabama that has been the best offense in the nation, the most consistent one week in and week out.
And that Alabama will be able to forget they won 31-14, they dominated that game. That they've already forgotten that game, and they're ready to come play for this national championship.
Yeah,
that's the other thing that makes, I think, like an underrated thing that makes it difficult to play Alabama is that you don't get a lot of times where you see them play and you're like, oh, they came out flat. Like just doesn't really happen. And so, you could get, national championship number 22 for Nick Saban, and they're going to be ready to go.
Play. Right. And so you got to go out and beat Alabama.
Yeah, there's no lucking into that.
And here's the thing is you got to go out there and beat them, in some cases out coach them, and you're not going to out talent them. So the hard thing about Alabama, what people don't understand, they got the best coach, they got the best coaching staff, the best foundation and culture, right? Because Nick Saban even said it. Look, I'll bring coaches in that kind of want to go through my coaching rehab, but they're just inserted. Right. So even when, say, like Greg Smith leaves to go to be the head coach at, so like Lockley at Maryland, the next guy coming in, here you go.
Right.
Now you add your little thing to it, but this is.
But you're gonna stay in these parameters.
This is the Bible here,
yep.
Okay, and don't go way either way. Just stay within these parameters, and this is where you do it. And then that's the way he's able to win consistently. And one of the things I learned when I started reading up on Nick Saban, he runs his program as close as possible as an NFL program. He has analysts, consultants. He has a huge coaching staff, right?
And he was in front on that. Like he was before. A lot of people are doing that stuff now. He was one of the first ones to do that and to really figure out how to maximize
every single player. But there's people that do it now, but they don't. They are still hesitant to do it like he's doing.
Yeah, people dip their toe in the water,
but they don't do it. They might have one analyst, one consultant. Nick Saban has 4 on each side of the ball, a special teams analyst and a coach, where everything you're not missing any minute detail, and that's what makes them really, really good. Their fundamentals are excellent. Their energy is excellent. They're a very strong team, and everything that they do is about football. They have a ton of fun. You see those guys, they love playing, but they also are getting, when you go there, look, you're here to play football, get a great education, so forth and so on. But we're going to get when you leave Alabama, you're not going to be like, man, I wish my coach would have made me better at this, or I had an opportunity. Every person from, player 1 to, I think they got 100, as far as, is getting the same treatment and the same standards, even if you're not playing, even if you're this 4-star recruit that's second or third on the depth chart. Yeah, you're going through practice with the same expectations as Patrick Surtain Jr.
Right,
over there,
Devonta Smith or somebody. Yeah, because the other thing too that is and it's not magic. You just have to build it this way. That you mentioned, so that second or third string 4 or 5-star recruit, and he's waiting his time, right? And I'm sure, they have a wide receiver that's waiting his time, right? And you'll see it next year after Devonta Smith leaves. But the reason why you don't see that guy like transfer out or like be disgruntled on social media or anything like that is because he saw Devonta Smith go through this same thing. He saw the same thing where that guy was biding his time or he played early, but like he didn't have as big of a role as he maybe has now, especially, right, where he probably should win the Heisman. But I've seen that guy go through it. Oh, by the way, we're winning national championships while I'm waiting. And then I know that they can use me like they used him. And then that way it just keeps rolling. And I think that that's something that it's hard to quantify and it's hard to really get your arms around it until you actually see it. Yeah. But they have that going, and that's why they're able to, I think they did it again, have the number 1 recruiting class, and then just keep having these guys come in. And people will always say to me, and I had it happen again this year, like, man, how do they keep getting all of these guys if they know that they're going to maybe come in and sit on the bench? Maybe they get, they get, say there's 20 recruits, 5 of them are 5 stars, the rest are 4 stars. How come those guys still go there? Right. Well, because they know that eventually they're going to get their turn, they're getting better, and they're winning.
Yeah, and if you do what you're asked to do, and obviously you got the talent, it's going to work itself out.
It will work.
You got to think, Jerry Jeudy just got drafted.
Right.
Just got drafted, and he was unstoppable.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying?
Bad man.
Right? So then let's not even think about it. You got Waddell that got hurt, right, this year.
Yeah.
And then you got Smith. And then so as they were going up and seeing Jerry Jeudy and all these other guys that were playing before them, it's also, you got to look at it, they have the mentoring all the way from Julio Jones on down, right? It's like Alabama is slowly but surely becoming wide receiver U and same with Ohio State.
Right.
It's not just your first-round picks. It's your fourth-round picks. It's the guys that go in and make teams and start to do things even at the pro level. So what they're doing is they're taking what they're learning from the older guys and from say like Julio Jones on down, and then they're giving it to these incoming freshmen. Like, look, man, wait your time. It's working out for me. This is how I did it. This is what we're doing inside the wide receiver room. Your time is coming. I'm going to the league next year. Here you go. And then also what they're able to do is that they're winning games by so much that these guys are actually still getting to play.
That too. That's a good.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah, so they might not be starting, but they're beating, Tennessee 48-10. Okay, so the starters are out. Here you go. Now you're getting in time to get some real routes in. So you're not only getting your practice time, You're getting it doubled down on the playing time. So it all kind of works itself out. So they're building depth and stardom at the same time, and you're reloading and not rebuilding. And that's what they're able to do at Alabama, and they've done it for quite some time. Because conversely, you look at LSU. They had all those receivers and all the offensive firepower last year. Their receiver this year is good, but they don't have a running back that's really good.
Right.
Brennan, their quarterback, is so-so. They lost Moss, the tight end, right? And you had 5 NFL guys out there last year, right? And then you had Joe Burrow, who was the number 1 pick, who was legit. And so they're not able to, rebuild and reload. Then you got to think okay, Tua's in the NFL, right?
Right.
Where Mac Jones going?
Oh, he going to the league too. Right. And it's funny because those guys need to be given a stipend to these wide receivers. I just pulled the photo because people were talking about Tua had a bad game yesterday, and they were like, this is where his it factor went. There's a photo from last year's Alabama team. Jerry Jeudy, Devonta Smith, Henry Ruggs III, and Jalen Waddle were his 4 receivers last year.
Oh, yeah,
that's
crazy. You got 2 first-round picks. Right, and I'm sure Waddle, if he didn't get hurt this year, would be a first-round pick. So I'm sure, let's say he's second round. He's a first, second-round pick, right? So you have 4 first-round picks right there.
Yeah.
And 1 Heisman winner. Devonta Smith.
I hope he wins it. I hope he wins it.
He's been – and if he doesn't win it, then it just – I mean, first of all, Trask from Florida, he should get his invite rescinded, okay? But Devonta Smith has been the most consistent and most dominant player from game 1 to, the final game. Yes, and that's what and he's on the best team.
Right.
And he's won the AP Player of the Year, and I think there's something like 75% of the time you win the AP Player of the Year, you win the Heisman.
But I also try to think of like teams that don't need to have like that extra publicity that comes with winning that Heisman. Like if you think about it, like Alabama going from what they started off the dynasty with Nick Saban and the powerful run game and all that, which they still have, to now be in this team that's wide receiver that can put wide receivers in the first round of the league and then win a Heisman at that, like to make that switch like through the same run. That's how you got to do it. You got to adjust. Look, at the end of the day, it starts and stops with their running game. It's still because they truly haven't lost their identity. And if you think about it, I know Sasha's here and she's a Patriot fan. When the Patriots win the Super Bowl, they have a running attack. Yeah. And their offensive line is physical. When their coach Dante retired and they tried to go pass happy, they brought him back out of retirement and said, "Look, man, you got to get up. You got to get up out of Cape Cod here. We got to get back. We need you for one more time. Come back." He retools the offensive line, and they take guys and they reestablish the line of scrimmage, and then they do it in a different way, right? So Nick Saban and Bill Belichick are best friends, right? They're all the way back to Cleveland. They're both, the Croatian coaches. They're both Croatian, and they. Whatever it is, they do it. If I'm going to make it a football coach, I got to find whoever's from Croatia. You're going to run my program. Like,
right?
are you from Croatia? Do you know them too?
Right. We're doing Ancestry.com. Do you got any Croatian in you? So what they do is they kind of go back and forth off each other, but they're also they're hard edged, but they have the ability to adapt and adjust, but then also stay within their same realms. And then we talked about Nick Saban and his coaching staff. We'll adapt and adjust. But this is where we're at. This is where we're going to start and stop. So we're going to still be able to line up and punch you in the mouth, but we're going to punch you in the mouth and then accentuate all these number 1 receivers that we got. You got to think Julio Jones, Amari Cooper, Jerry Jeudy, Ruggs, and I'm pretty sure I'm missing some. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? I mean,
That's a run.
That is a run.
Yeah. And but the thing is, but it's crazy. What's as equally impressive though, if you start to list out the running backs in a row, like it's just as crazy, right?
And then also you got to think that your boy for the Saints, Kamara, transferred from Alabama to Tennessee. Right.
And so they still didn't give him the ball enough when he was at Tennessee.
Right.
Like, weird.
He just kind of –
it's such a weird situation.
Right, but it's – so it can be done. It's not easy. It's definitely hard. But like I said, if you take more of a pro mentality, it does turn around really once you turn that corner, you kind of stay on that straight line because you don't have to deviate much. And so he's done it, and he's done it at the highest level, and obviously he's probably the greatest – college football coach of all time.
I'm just going to leave that part right there.
I think it's Coach Osborne, but I'm just
saying I was going to leave that uncomfortable silence out there for you because I don't want you getting calls.
I ain't going to get no calls. I think it's Coach Osborne, but I'm just saying, dude, he's winning national championships. Seems like left and right.
Okay, I will leave it. I will say about that. The only thing about Saban versus Coach Osborne is I think it's harder to do what Saban is doing now, especially now as we transition to these rules that are in place to be guys can leave, and you have so many more teams that are viable that recruits can go to, even though they don't, and they go to Alabama anyway. But you know what I mean? It's just different, and that's not to say that what T.O. did was easy. And it was a different level of longevity with him as well. Right. But I think they're 1 and 2, whichever way you want to.
Yeah, it's. In some ways, I think it's harder, but then in some ways, I think it's easier. Because if we were playing right now and we were the team that we were in 94, 95, 97, and 96, and 93, and 92, everybody and their mama are going to be coming to Nebraska. So we would be doing the same thing. So I don't –
it would have been different. Yeah, I agree with that.
And because we had the same structure, though. Yeah. That's why I don't think it would be – that's why I don't think it's that hard. What I think it's hard for a lot of guys. Here's what coaches' biggest problem. Here's what a lot of coaches' biggest problems are. And I'm talking about throughout the whole nation. Is they'll come in and they'll take over a program, and say a program has been winning a certain way. And this is in reference to particularly Bill Callahan. This is the way Nebraska's won. Well, let me just totally change it up. Instead of let me win the way we've been winning, and then slowly but surely start to win I'd like to win. Right. So they trying to force something.
It's a lot easier to change when you're winning than it is to go wholesale. Yeah.
That's it. And Nick Saban knew the only way that Alabama could win in that first and second year was establish a line of scrimmage, recruit better from Alabama, and make Alabama, the new it school, and that's by producing pro guys. And then now it's kind of just taken off, and it's kind of turnkey.
Yeah, it really is. I'll be so curious to see when the next coach comes in if they can keep that going.
He coached until he did.
But I don't think he's going anywhere.
No, he don't want to do nothing else.
Yeah.
He don't want to do nothing else.
But why? If I'm him, I'm trying to think of what the end line would be. I just want to keep seeing, see how many national titles I can stack up.
If I'm him, if I still have the energy that he looks like that he has, I'm gonna go try my hand one more time in the NFL.
Okay.
Because if you look at his coaching resume, right? That's college is untouchable.
Yep. And he's 69 years old.
Yeah.
By the way,
college is untouchable. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's no chink in his stuff.
He's 158 and 23 in college.
Right. And that's even coaching at Michigan State.
Right. And that's with those years in. Yeah.
I'm going back and seeing if I can do it one more time. The only thing that's going to stop him is because he doesn't want to mess up that legacy.
Right.
But if you want to kind of be the, the dude, if you want to leapfrog everybody, all right, I'm going to the pros and I'm going to show you. But the biggest thing in the pros now it's not winning that. You got to win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, which is just.
And it's hard because pros is harder because at times a lot of times you're going to have players making more than the coaches.
Right. It's not like he makes $8.6 million now.
Right.
Players making
nothing. No scholarship check making
allegedly nothing. And then we're going. Yeah. So you're never going to have that. So it's just going to be. I'd be interested if he ever has that itch. I still think that he wanted to go. He would have taken that Texas job a couple of years ago if he really had the appetite to do another rebuild. He already had it up and running at Alabama. It was like, why would I go to Texas with all their politics and then figure out how to get us to where I have this program now? I got to put myself through this grief just to get to where I already am.
Right, but then Texas would take that. It gives you a little bit different cachet. Here's the problem with Texas is they'll go hire another coach, right? Mm-hmm. You'll have the same result because internally they won't let you win. There's so much politics inside that program. Doesn't matter who comes in there and coaches. Tom Herman's not a bad coach.
No, he's not.
The things that stop coaches from being successful at Texas are what's going on, behind closed doors that has nothing to do with coaching. I mean, Texas is just Well, I guess the quote is like it's a sewage. It's sewage there, as far as stuff that's going on. So, do I think Sark's the right guy? I don't necessarily know. I know he can recruit Texas, and I think that's one of the biggest things.
That will be an interest. He's going to have to. He has to figure that out.
Yeah, he's been the one plucking all these guys from Texas, and so I guess it's twofold. And I think with the offense, obviously is made them more marketable.
And they'll have talent because they always have talent. It's whether or not you can coach them up. It'll be interesting to see because I'm rooting for him in a way because, you have people come back from tough personal stuff. Like, you always want to see people be able to bounce back.
Second chance, you definitely want him to do
well. But it's just going to be like all the other factors and whether or not you can actually get that right.
After the first loss to Oklahoma, how fast does that clock start to get him up out of there?
Oh, it already hits. At halftime, if they lose in Oklahoma, it starts.
Yeah.
All right, now every week we end the show with my favorite segment called Put 'em on Blast, where we basically put somebody on blast for something they did or said.
Put them on blast.
I am skipping me this time because we didn't already put Dabo Swinney on blast. That's who I was going to do.
Oh, okay.
Because Dabo ranking Ohio State 11 and then caught all the slander over social media over the weekend and then said he wouldn't have changed a thing. Come on, man. Like, we can't be out here doing that. So I went with Dabo already, and we talked about that at length. So, Jay, who you got this
I'm
week?
Putting Doug Peterson on blast and the Philadelphia Eagles. As I will say this, it's been a great accomplishment by the NFL to get all 256 games accomplished. You know what I mean? It did look dicey, and they pushed right through it. I think they've they've given you like the Cliff Notes version on how to run a huge organization. Here you go, NCAA, and push through it and adjust too as well. Yeah. Games Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, right? And
that one day that they were playing at lunchtime, and I texted you, and I was like, they playing a game right now?
Right, but hey, look, you got to get it done. But for the Philadelphia Eagles and their brass and Doug Peterson, who was on the hot seat, and I will say this, for him to make that move to pull Hurts, let me know that he's coming back next year because he doesn't make that move.
You can't do that without knowing you coming back. Yeah,
I'm putting him on blast because you got 53 guys that are going out there and trying to win, and you got guys that might end up retiring that might not be on the team next year. You're dealing with people's livelihoods and their careers, and you're going to throw a guy out there and a chance to beat your rival in the Washington football team and stop them from going to the playoffs and essentially give up because you're going to get the number 6 pick in the draft. Ideally, that's great if you're getting the 1 or 2 pick, right?
Yeah, I would. I can at least listen to you on that.
But who are you going to pick at number 6 that you think that's going to turn around your whole organization, that's going to stop you from giving up big plays on defense, that you can't stop the run at the second level, that you aren't really set on a quarterback, you don't have a number 1 running back, you got numerous injuries on the offensive line. So you think the number 6 pick, you think doing that from going, if you won that game, they would have probably had the 8 pick. Who are you picking at number 6 that you know that you're going to guarantee 5 months from now that you're going to be able to pick at number 6 that's going to come in and turn around your organization just to get the 6th pick?
And it's always it's a little bit of a crapshoot at that point in the draft anyway, in general. But at that point too, because you can at 6 you can get a Hall of Fame player, right? Or you can get a guy that's out of the league in 3 years.
Oh yeah. So I mean, you can get Patrick Mahomes or Dwayne Haskins at 6, anywhere from there. You never know what you're getting until you get them. And so, to essentially be the last game 256, that where if the NFL could ever write a script, obviously you don't want the NFC East to where you got one team 4-11-1 or whatever, 7-9 and 6-10 or whatever to going for the title. But if you could write the script that if you said, hey, Roger Goodell, if you could have if we have Philly against the Washington football team for all the marbles on Sunday Night Football, the last game through a pandemic, he'd be like, bet, I want that.
Right.
And then to be a competitive game and somewhat exciting game, even though Jalen Hurts didn't really play that well. He was 7-10 for 70-some yards, 2 rushing TDs. And then all of a sudden when the game is a one-score game, you say, hey, dude, I'm going to put you in the game, and you ain't played in 3 years.
Yeah. It's so weird.
And then get in there and say, oh, well, I was trying to win because Darius Slay was playing and Graham was playing and all these guys that had to play, right? But then on the injury report, you had a whole bunch of fake injuries and other guys that didn't, like the Fletcher Cox and those guys didn't play, right? Because that's why you saw McGill, who essentially lost the game jumping off sides. All those guys were playing. But then you're trying to tell me you're trying to win. And let me tell you something. NFL players know if organization and coaches are trying to win. You can't sell that to anybody.
Right. That's going to be – that's where it's going to be.
Because this guy hadn't played in 3 years. Nobody deserves to play in the NFL. You earn your right to play. Right. Jalen Hurts earned the right to start and to finish that game.
Right.
You get what I'm saying? Because if you really were trying to win, you get Carson Wentz. So you're the backup quarterback. I'm trying to win. Get in there and win the game if you want your job.
Right. And you could have sold that, and people would have been able to go on board with that. It might not have worked.
You did it.
But you could at least
Chicago
do
Bears
it.
did it.
Yeah.
And they're in the playoffs.
We back.
Right. Mitchell Trubisky, right?
Oh,
no, seriously.
But
it's done. It's been done.
Yeah.
They could have very easily, Nagy and them could have very cashed in. All right, I'm gonna get fired or whatever. Yeah. Oh no, look. If you want a job, I want a job. We're going to the playoffs.
I do agree. I give the Bears coaches and brass credit for that. They did decide, okay, we're going to go down swinging. If we're going down, we're going down, but we are going to actually make an attempt, and they got rewarded by ending up making the playoffs. So I'll give you
And
that.
the Philadelphia Eagles didn't go down. And look, if you think about the Philadelphia city, they're supposed to be tough, rocky, never give up, always exceeding expectations because they kind of, the Philly tough. Yeah. You went out like a chump, man. I mean, it was a bad look for Philadelphia, Coach Peterson, the organization in the NFL. Now, look, I understand this. If I'm the head coach and the owner comes in and say, listen here, man, this is what you need to do in order to come back next year, I'm going to do it every single time. I'm going to find a different way to say that I'm not trying to win.
Yeah, I better have a real airtight excuse for how I'm going to go about this tank.
Because I'm telling Jalen Hurts, because Jalen Hurts was seeing mouth like, I don't know why.
Right.
Because that lets me know that you went to Sudfeld to saying that he was going to play and you didn't go to Jalen Hurts.
Right.
It's going to be an interesting offseason in Philly in that quarterback room.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so
they all on blast.
Yes, they are. But that's going to do it for us this week. Subscribe to the podcast everywhere you listen to them. Rate us and leave us a 5-star review. If you leave 4, I am inclined to think you're a hater, and nobody wants that. Make sure that you're checking out the other podcasts on the Hail Varsity Network, the Mind Your Own podcast, Varsity Club, More to It, and the Hail Varsity Radio Show. We do have an email. You can email us at straightupbreakdown@hailvarsity.com, and you can find us on Twitter at GregSmithHV and at Foreman5644. We will catch you next time.
A Hurrdat Media Production.